Okay, so we're back and we're talking about Act 2, Scene 2, which begins in the same place. We're still in Macbeth's castle. Things are still happening here. It's just a continuation of what's going on. And we've just left Macbeth heading off in order to murder Duncan. And we have enter Lady Macbeth. Um, Now, one of the key things about this scene is in between Act 2, Scene 1 and Act 2, Scene 2, Duncan is killed. But it happens off stage. So what we see here, we see at the end of Act 2, Scene 1, we see Macbeth heading off and being like, right, I'm going to go kill Duncan. And then Act 2, Scene 2, we see the consequences. Now, you might read online, sometimes people say, oh, Shakespeare did this because, they kept the gory deaths off stage, blah, blah, blah. Utter nonsense. Okay, the Shakespeare has a long tradition of having really, really gory stuff happen on stage. This is not some kind of nicety or sense of propriety that they didn't have this murder take place off stage. Okay, in plays like Titus Andronicus, for example, Shakespeare has people chopping off arms and hands on stage. He has all sorts types of hangings and people being sliced open. Shakespeare loved a bit of gore, right? So there was nothing. It's not about hiding the gore from the audience. So we have to think about, why does this death, the death that is so central to this play, happen off stage? Why do we not see it? It seems bizarre to have a death that is the turning point for the whole play not take place in the actual action of the play. And I think there's two reasons for that, and those reasons are interlinked. The first is that Macbeth is our tragic hero. And when we think about traditional Shakespearean tragedies and the Greek tragedies upon which they are based, the tragic hero, we need to empathize with them a little bit, okay? And Shakespeare's really trying hard here to show a Macbeth that we can sympathize with. A Macbeth that we can understand his struggles. This is not a character who is pure evil, who is purely villainous. And Shakespeare has many such characters. Okay, we have Iago in Othello, we have Aaron in Titus Andronicus, which I spoke about before. We have many pure evil characters who just want to kill and destroy things for the sake of it, right? Macbeth is not one such character. Macbeth is a character who is plagued by his conscience and the guilt of what he is being manipulated into doing. And so we do empathize with him and we do sympathize with him. And I think actually seeing him sneaking into essentially an old man's bedroom and stabbing him while he sleeps would probably be an act that would take us as an audience too far. It would make it be impossible to sympathize with Macbeth. So Shakespeare does not show us this. Instead, and this is the second point, what Shakespeare shows us is the reaction to such acts, because that is what this whole play is about. Act 1 was very much about manipulation and ambition and things like that, but the murder happens now. Act 2, Scene 2, the murder is done, and we still have a 5-act play. So what is this play all about? This play is about guilt. This play is about what doing something like that does to a person. And so the focus of this play is not actually on the act, but is on the consequences of the act. It's not on the murder, but it's about how one feels after the murder. And so it makes sense that the murder does not take center stage. In fact, we are introduced to the murder by how they feel immediately after the murder is done. That's the focus of the play. That's the interest of the play. And so Shakespeare actually uses the staging in order to put that focus on. Whereas another playwright might have been like, okay, the murder needs to happen, put it on stage. Shakespeare hides it. He says, this is not important. What's important is not the fact that the king was murdered. What's important is how Macbeth and Lady Macbeth feel about it. And that's what I'm going to focus on. So that's what we focus on in this scene, Act 2, Scene 2. Lady Macbeth opens being the Lady Macbeth that we know. She says, that which had made them drunk hath made me bold. So she's had a drink, but what's made them drunk has made her bold. She feels strong. She feels powerful. She says here, he is about it. The doors are open, and the surfeited grooms do mock their charge with snores. I have drugged their possets. She's drugged the guards. She knows Macbeth is about the act. She's almost excited. She's filled with energy about this. And then we hear Macbeth off stage. Who's there? What? Ho! Come in. Now, again, Lady Macbeth is still all business, right? She's like, oh no, is something wrong? I am afraid they have awaked and 'tis not done. The attempt and not the deed confound us. She's starting to worry a little bit. Why is he coming back? Why is he shouting? What's so wrong? And then we get a really interesting line here, where she says, so part of the plan was she laid the daggers ready for Duncan to be killed. But she says, had he not resembled my father as he slept, I had done it. So she would have killed Duncan herself, except Duncan reminded her, this old man sleeping in his bed, of her father, and therefore she couldn't. And so for all of this purging of her conscience that we have in Act 1, for all of this unsex me here, fill me from the top toe to the crown full of direst cruelty that we had in Act 1, there's a bubbling conscience underneath. And this line is here because Shakespeare continually reminds us of that. Shakespeare spends this play reminding us that there is no such thing as a man or a woman without a conscience. And try as they might to be evil, we are still plagued with thoughts of conscience and of morality and of guilt. And so even in their worst moments, Lady Macbeth and Macbeth, they crop up things like this to show that they actually can't fully commit, can't fully go through with this endeavour that they have embarked upon. Now Macbeth shows up and he is all over the place, right? Think about the detailed soliloquy that we had in the last scene and the build up to the murder and the determination to do the deed. And then now just look at this. Look, he's all over the place. I have done the deed. Didst thou hear a noise? Did you not speak? When? Now? As I descended? He doesn't even know that he shouted out as he descended. He doesn't know what's going. He seems like he barely knows where he is. He's in this haze. Hark! Who lies in the second chamber? And then he looks at his hands and he says, "This is a sorry sight." Now Macbeth brushes him off, says it's a foolish thought. Stop saying that. But Macbeth is completely wrapped by what has happened. The motif of hands is a really big one in this play. Hands are symbols for action. Hands are the things we use to do things, and they represent our actions. And you'll see as the play goes on that as Macbeth and Lady Macbeth respond to the murder of Duncan and the guilt for the murder of Duncan in a lot of different ways, there's a lot of reference to their hands that come up. And so here we have the first instance of it where Macbeth looks at his hands and says, this is a sorry sight. So not just his hands themselves, but as a representative of his actions. His actions are a sorry sight. He immediately, after having done it, feels guilt for what he did. So Macbeth describes what happened. He said that of the two guards who were asleep, one did laugh in his sleep, and one cried murder, that they did wake each other. And I stood and heard them, but they did say their prayers and address them and again to sleep. So he hid while they went back to sleep. There was a sense that something was wrong. One cried, God bless us, and amen the other, and they had seen me with these hangman's hands. He describes his hands as hangman's hands, hands that are executioner's hands. Listening their fear, I could not say amen when they did say God bless us. So this is key. These guards kind of stirred in the night. They thought they heard something, and they settled themselves back to sleep by saying a prayer, by connecting with God, and by saying, God bless you, God bless us, and amen. And yet, when they said God bless us, Macbeth felt that he could not say amen. He has been, through this act, severed from God. He no longer gets peace in saying a prayer to God. So we have a break of Macbeth's relationship to God through committing this act, through killing the king and betraying his position. Now, Lady Macbeth is still like, don't worry about it. Just consider it not so deeply. Like, what's wrong with you? Macbeth is wrapped with guilt and racked with these pains, and Lady Macbeth is just like, come on, get over it. What are you doing? And so we still get this very action-driven Lady Macbeth that we had in Act 1. But Macbeth can't leave it alone. But wherefore could I not pronounce Amen? I had most need of blessing, and Amen stuck in my throat. I love, again, we talked about it before, when these little lines crop up in Shakespeare that become part of everyday speech since these plays were written. The idea of something being stuck in your throat first originates from this play. Important to note, wherever you come across wherefore means why. It doesn't mean where, it means why. Wherefore is an archaic word for why. So he says, why could I not pronounce Amen? He doesn't understand. He doesn't understand why he's struggling with all of this. And Lady Macbeth, with a bit of clever foreshadowing here, says, these deeds must not be thought after these ways. This is an interesting link back to some other themes in the play. She talks about how it's a bad thing to think about these actions. You don't want to think about them, you just want to get on with them. Now, Macbeth echoed that a lot in Act 1 at different points. This eyes of the eye wink at the hand. I don't want to see what my actions are. I don't want to have to think about them too much. Or if it were done, it were good if it were done quickly, right? So I don't have to think about it too much. He's recognized this himself. He's like thinking, ruminating and weighing these decisions and these actions is a bad thing. Because, as Lady Macbeth says, so it will make us mad. And yet Macbeth can't stop. He can't stop thinking about it. He can't get his brain off it. He says, methought I heard a voice cry, sleep no more. Macbeth does murder sleep. The innocent sleep. Sleep that knits up the ravelled sleeve of care, the death of each day's life, sore labour's bath, balm of hurt minds, great nature's second course, chief nourisher in life's feast. Lady Macbeth's like, what are you on about? Still it cried, sleep no more to all the house. Glamis has murdered sleep, and therefore Cawdor shall sleep no more. Macbeth shall sleep no more. I talked in Act 2, Scene 1 about this motif of sleep as being representative of peace here, and here it's really driven home. Macbeth recognises that after what he has done, he will not sleep again. Macbeth shall sleep no more, because he has murdered sleep. He has killed the peace in this world. The peace that comes with a natural order. And the idea of natural order is brought into mind here with some of this language. That sleep is described as great nature's second course, chief nourisher in life's feast, right? This is a natural, wonderful thing that sleep is. It soars over the day's labour. It is the bath that soars our labour, right? It is a wonderful thing, and yet Macbeth has murdered that, and he will never sleep again. That's what he thinks at this time. And so it's a really powerful demonstration of the immediate guilt that he feels after going on. Now, we get a bit of a reflection of what happened in the end of Act 1, where Lady Macbeth kind of mocks Macbeth and shames him into doing the act. Here again, with these questions. Who was it that thus cried? Why, worthy Thane, you do unbend your noble strength to think so brain-sickly of things. So she's trying the same things again. She's like, you're brain-sick, you're not being noble, everything's wrong. She's like pushing him and trying to push him into action again. Go get some water and wash this filthy witness from your hand. So by filthy witness, she means the blood that's on his hand. Why did you bring these daggers from the place? They must lie over there. Go carry them and smear the sleepy grooms with blood. So he's not continuing, he's so confused he's not doing the plan right. And Lady Macbeth is trying to put him into shape. But this time, it's not working. It's not working like it did in Act 1. He just says, I'll go no more. I am afraid to think what I have done. Look on it again, I dare not. So he's like, I can't even think about what I've done. I can't go back in there. I can't look at Duncan's dead body again. Now she's furious. Infirm of purpose, she calls him, which means that he's almost disabled, that he can't do anything. And she has to go back in, right? Give me the daggers. The sleeping and the dead are as but pictures. 'Tis the eye of childhood that fears a painted devil. She takes a much more practical standpoint on all of this. She's like, I'm going to go do it. And look how she describes, the sleeping and the dead are but as pictures. A dead body is nothing. It's not alive. It's not going to hurt you. It's not going to do anything. She calls it childish to fear a dead body. Okay? She says, if he do bleed, I'll gild the faces of the grooms withal, for it must seem their guilt. So she's going to go back in there to find Duncan, who's been killed. She's going to see if he bleeds. She's going to take that blood and she's going to put it on the sleeping guards who she's already drugged. So it seems like that. So she doesn't have any issues with this dead body or this blood, it seems. Macbeth is like, doesn't know what to do with himself. He's so filled with guilt. She's like, right, give me the daggers. I'm going to go sort it out. And she leaves. And then a knocking starts. And this knocking continues for a while throughout this scene. It's quite a powerful thing. It's kind of this building sense of something that's happening. And Macbeth starts to freak out a little bit. Whence is that knocking? How is it with me, when every noise appalls me? What hands are here? Ha! They pluck out mine eyes. We get this very short, cut-off language filled with kind of ha! And expletives and things like that. He's going a little bit crazy. He looks at his own hands and says, what hands are here? And says that they pluck out his own eyes because he doesn't want to have to see anything. Yeah, it's a real turn of guilt in that situation. So this caesura is the language breaking here, and falling apart. We note that he's trying to, as well, cover up this deed with purple prose and like with soliloquy again. So put it this way, when he's thought about these deeds in the past, he's kind of gone off on a big speech and he's kind of talked about them and it's how he's processed the deeds in his mind, okay? And he starts to do that here. He starts to be really kind of metaphorical and be like, will all great Neptune's ocean wash this blood clean from my hand? No, this my hand will rather the multitudinous seas in incarnadine. But it kind of falls off towards the end. We've got these big, huge multisyllabic words, and then it ends with making the green one red. And it doesn't really work. His kind of talking through this, he just ends with, I have no more that I have to say. He's just so racked with the guilt that's going on. And this knocking continues. And this knocking is just this build-up of tension. There's knocking going on throughout the house. And it's almost like a reminder of what they've just done. So Macbeth can't forget about it. And the last two things Macbeth says in this scene are, to know my deed, 'twere best not know myself. So he realizes what he's become. He says, to understand what I've just done to Duncan, I'd prefer not to know anything about myself because it's taught me what kind of person I am. And his last line, wake Duncan with thy knocking, I would thou couldst. I wish you could wake Duncan up. Complete regret. He should not have done this. He knows he should not have done this. And it's immediately after the act. It's immediately after the scene. Okay, and that's a really key point here for Macbeth. We talked about why the scene is off stage. We're so much more sympathetic to Macbeth when we see we don't actually see him killing Duncan. What we do see is intense guilt and regret immediately afterwards, okay? And even with Lady Macbeth trying to push him into being a little bit more serious and a little bit more, taking things a little bit more practically, he can't do it. He's completely in a haze of guilt here. And that allows us to really understand him as a tragic hero in this situation. What he's been manipulated into doing by the witches, by his wife, by the prophecy, was a bad thing, and he knows it. He knows it was a terrible thing.